If your hands or feet feel like they are being stabbed by thousands of tiny invisible needles. If you have ever woken up in the middle of the night because the simple weight of a bedsheet felt unbearable against your toes. If your fingers have started dropping buttons, cups, keys, or anything else that used to feel effortless, then I need you to stop what you are doing and listen very carefully. Because what you are feeling is not just bad circulation. It is not just getting older. It is not just one of those things that happens after 60. And it is certainly not something you should accept just because someone told you to manage the pain. What you are feeling may be a biological distress signal from nerves that are literally losing access to the fuel, oxygen, and repair signals they need to stay alive. That is the real emergency, not just the pain, not just the numbness, not just the burning. The fact that something inside your body may already be starving, fraying, and slowly going silent while the standard advice stays stuck at, let's just try to make you more comfortable. I'm Dr. Adrian. And after years of studying the patterns that quietly destroy quality of life in older adults, I can tell you this plainly. Peripheral neuropathy is one of the most misunderstood conditions I see, because by the time many people realize it is serious, they are no longer only dealing with pain, they are dealing with numbness, poor balance, loss of confidence, fear of stairs, fear of driving, fear of uneven ground, fear of falling, fear that their own body is becoming less reliable day by day. And that fear is not irrational. Because when the nerves in your hands and feet begin to fail, it changes everything. How you walk, how you sleep, how you dress, how you cook, how you feel the floor beneath you, how safe you are in the shower, on the stairs, in the dark, in the car, on the sidewalk. It changes how independent you feel. And that is why this conversation matters, because what you are feeling is not random. It is not always irreversible, and in many cases, the body is not failing because it is too old to repair. It is failing because the repair system has been metabolically blocked. Today, I am going to walk you through a deep, practical masterclass on nerve repair. Not surface-level advice, not vague suggestions. I'm going to show you what is actually happening inside the nerves, why the standard forms of certain vitamins often fail, which common medications quietly worsen the problem, which healthy habits may actually be accelerating nerve damage, and what kind of protocol gives your nerves the best chance to stop deteriorating and begin recovering. But before we talk about repair, we have to be brutally honest about the damage. Because if you do not understand the mechanism, you cannot fix it. The condition we are talking about is peripheral neuropathy. Peripheral means the edges of the body, the outer territories, your feet, your toes, your hands, your fingers, the places farthest from the center. Neuro means nerves, pathy means suffering or disease, so the phrase itself tells the story, the suffering of the outer nerves, and that suffering often starts quietly. You may feel like there is a crumpled sock under your foot when there isn't. You may feel like your feet are ice cold on the outside but burning hot on the inside. You may feel numbness and pain in the same exact body part and not understand how both can be true at once. You may feel stabbing shocks, buzzing, pins and needles, a strange deadness, a delayed response when your foot touches the floor. These are contradictory signals, and that is exactly why people get confused, because the brain is receiving broken information from a damaged wire. That wire is the nerve, and the damage is often happening from the farthest ends backward. This is what clinicians sometimes describe as a dying back pattern, and it is one of the most important ideas to understand. Imagine a lamp plugged into a long extension cord. If the electrical supply becomes weak, unstable, or blocked, the end of that cord starts failing first. The flicker happens at the far end, not near the wall. In your body, your foot is the lamp. The sciatic nerve is the cord. And because the nerves going to your feet are among the longest in the body, they are the hardest to maintain. They are the hardest to feed, the hardest to oxygenate, the hardest to protect. So when your body enters metabolic crisis, from high blood sugar, inflammation, nutrient deficiency, poor circulation, or chronic cellular stress, it does not shut down all nerves equally. It starts sacrificing the farthest territory first. That is why neuropathy usually begins in the toes and feet before it climbs upward. That is why the earliest signals so often feel subtle, strange, and easy to dismiss. And that is why so many people underestimate it until the decline becomes harder to ignore. That tingling, that buzzing, that weird patch of numbness, that is not trivial. That may be the flicker of a starving nerve. Now let's talk about why those nerves are starving. Because this is where things become very important. One of the major culprits is a process called glycation. And I want you to picture this in the simplest possible way. Imagine a fresh egg. The white is clear and fluid. Now imagine pouring that egg onto a hot sidewalk. It turns white, it stiffens, it hardens, its structure changes. That is similar to what chronically elevated sugar does to proteins in your body. Not in one day, not after one dessert, but after years of repeated exposure. Even modestly elevated blood sugar, especially in prediabetes, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, or poorly controlled diabetes, can slowly create a sticky, damaging chemical environment. That environment produces compounds called advanced glycation end products, AGEs. And the name is fitting because they accelerate aging at the tissue level. Think of them as sugar rust. They clog, they stiffen, they distort, they damage. And one of the places they do enormous harm is in the tiny blood vessels that feed your nerves. These microscopic vessels are called the vasa nervorum. And if you have never heard that term before, that is okay. What matters is what they do. They are the supply lines. They deliver oxygen and nutrients to nerve tissue. And when those tiny vessels become damaged, inflamed, narrowed, or coated in sugar rust, the nerve begins to suffocate. Not dramatically, quietly. It does not die all at once. It first becomes irritated, then unstable, then inflamed, then unreliable, then weak, then silent. And that silence is more dangerous than most people realize. Because pain is a warning. Numbness is the loss of warning. Pain tells you a nerve is screaming. Numbness tells you the nerve may be too damaged to scream anymore. That is the danger zone. Because once you cannot feel your foot properly, a cut becomes invisible. A blister becomes invisible. A pressure sore becomes invisible. A shoe injury becomes invisible. And what begins as numbness can become ulcer, infection, hospitalization, or worse. That is why we do not wait for silence. We intervene before the silence becomes permanent. Now here is where the story becomes hopeful, because your body is not defenseless against this sugar rust. It actually has a built-in defense system, an enzyme called transketolase. And if that word sounds technical, here is the simple version. Think of transketolase as a metabolic cleanup machine, a specialized vacuum cleaner designed to pick up toxic sugar byproducts and reroute them into safer energy pathways before they can damage tissue. When this system is working properly, your nerves are better protected. When it is not working properly, the toxic waste accumulates. Now here is the catch. This cleanup system needs fuel. It cannot switch on by itself. It needs one specific nutrient to work. That nutrient is vitamin B1, thiamine. This is one of the most important things I can tell you in this entire video. Vitamin B1 is not just a good vitamin for nerves, it is a metabolic ignition key. Without it, the cleanup enzyme does not work properly. Without it, sugar byproducts pile up. Without it, the nerve remains trapped in a toxic, inflamed, energy-starved state. And that is where many people make a fatal mistake. They say, "But Dr. Adrian, I take a multivitamin," or "I eat fortified cereal," or "I'm already getting B1." Maybe, maybe not, because the form matters, and the form is where millions of older adults get misled. The standard B1 in cheap supplements and fortified foods is usually thiamine mononitrate or thiamine hydrochloride. These are water-soluble forms. They are cheap, they are common, and in younger, healthier digestive systems, they may do something. But aging changes absorption. Stomach acid often declines. Transport mechanisms become less efficient. Medication interferes, gut lining changes, metabolic demand increases. And even if some of that vitamin reaches the bloodstream, another problem remains, getting it into the nerve cell. Because nerve cells are wrapped in a fatty protective layer called the myelin sheath, and water-soluble nutrients do not move through fat-rich membranes easily. So you can end up in a bizarre situation where blood levels look acceptable, but the nerve tissue is still functionally starving. That is why the first pillar of real nerve repair is not just more B1, it is benfotiamine. Benfotiamine is a fat-soluble derivative of thiamine, and that difference matters enormously, because instead of struggling to cross lipid membranes, it moves through far more effectively. It gets into tissue better, it reaches nerve cells better, it activates the cleanup machinery better, and that is why it has generated so much interest in nerve repair. It is not just stronger B1, it is B1 designed in a way the aging body can actually use more efficiently. When benfotiamine reaches the nerve cell, transketolase wakes up. The cleanup process begins. Toxic sugar byproducts start getting pulled away from the damage pathway. Energy pathways begin to function more normally. The cell becomes less trapped, and that is why some people begin noticing changes within weeks. Not because nerves heal overnight, they do not, but because the metabolic blockade is finally being addressed. Now I need to tell you something else. Because many of you are not just dealing with deficiency, you are being actively depleted by medication. This is one of the cruel ironies of modern medicine. The very medications used to treat some of the diseases that cause neuropathy can also make the nutrient problem worse. Metformin is one example, a valuable drug for blood sugar control, but it is well known for interfering with B12 status and may contribute to a nutrient environment that is less supportive for nerves. Diuretics, water pills for blood pressure and swelling, flush out water-soluble nutrients, including thiamine. Chronic antacid use changes the digestive environment and can worsen B12 absorption. So now imagine the full picture. A person already struggling with sugar damage, already metabolically strained, is also on medications that deplete or interfere with the very nutrients needed for repair. That is why standard advice fails so often. It treats the symptom, it dulls the pain, but it never asks whether the nerve is still being robbed every single day. Now let me be very clear, this is not a reason to stop your medication. That would be reckless. It is a reason to supplement intelligently and talk to your clinician with more precision. Now let's move to the second pillar of nerve repair, because turning on the cleanup machine is not enough. If the wiring is damaged, you also need structural repair, and that brings us to alpha-lipoic acid, ALA. This nutrient matters because nerve damage is not only about sugar, it is also about oxidative stress. Rust, inflammatory injury, mitochondrial strain, and alpha-lipoic acid is one of the few antioxidants that works in both fat and water environments. That makes it unusually useful for nerve tissue. It can move through more compartments, reach more targets, reduce more damage, and it has one job I care a lot about in neuropathy: helping improve the internal environment so the nerve can conduct more normally again, not by numbing it, by reducing the oxidative burden that keeps it inflamed and dysfunctional. Now here is the important detail. Not all ALA is the same. Cheap supplements often use mixed forms that are not nearly as useful as stabilized R-lipoic acid, the naturally active form. If you are going to use it, quality matters, because this is not a decoration. It is supposed to do a job. And if the quality is poor, the job gets done poorly. Now the third pillar, vitamin B12. But again, form matters. Methylcobalamin. Not the cheapest synthetic option, not the one added because it is inexpensive. Methylcobalamin matters because B12 is deeply involved in myelin maintenance and nerve repair. If benfotiamine helps restore metabolic cleanup, B12 helps repair the insulation. And if the insulation around a nerve is damaged, the signal becomes distorted. That is when you get burning, misfiring, sharp shocks, false messages, delayed sensation. That awful combination of pain and numbness living together in the same foot. One of the biggest mistakes people make is taking whatever B12 is cheapest and assuming all forms are equal. They are not. Just like with B1, the body does not care what the bottle promises. It cares what the cells can use. Now, I need to give you a warning that many people never hear until they have already made themselves worse. Vitamin B6. This is one of the most misunderstood nutrients in neuropathy because B6 is necessary in small, appropriate amounts. But too much of the wrong kind can actually cause nerve damage. That is right. People hear B vitamins are good for nerves, so they start taking high-dose B-complex formulas for months or years. And if those formulas contain large doses of pyridoxine HCl, the synthetic form of B6, they can sometimes worsen neuropathy instead of helping it. This is the B6 paradox. Deficiency can hurt nerves. Toxicity can also hurt nerves, so if you are choosing a formula, you do not want a careless megadose. You want intelligent formulation. You want the active form, P5P, in a reasonable amount, not the supplement equivalent of dumping random chemicals on an electrical fire and hoping for the best. Now let's talk about a fourth piece that deserves much more attention than it gets: acetyl L-carnitine. Nerves are energy hungry. They require huge amounts of mitochondrial activity just to conduct signals correctly. And when mitochondrial function drops, repair becomes harder, signal transmission becomes weaker, and fatigue often travels alongside the neuropathy. Acetyl L-carnitine supports mitochondrial energy handling. That makes it especially interesting for people whose neuropathy comes with weakness, heaviness, or that dead tired feeling in the limbs. Now, am I telling you one single nutrient fixes everything? No, that is exactly the trap I want you to avoid. Neuropathy repair is not one lever, it is a system. Benfotiamine helps address metabolic sugar stress. R-lipoic acid helps reduce oxidative injury. Methylcobalamin helps support structural nerve repair. Acetyl L-carnitine supports mitochondrial energy. And there is another player many people desperately need: magnesium. Magnesium is one of the most underappreciated tools in pain regulation. If you are deficient, and many older adults are, your nervous system becomes more irritable, more reactive, more electrically unstable. Pain signals get louder, cramping gets worse, sleep gets worse. And without enough magnesium, some of the enzymatic systems that B vitamins depend on work less efficiently too. This is why good magnesium glycinate in the evening often helps two things at once. It lowers the excitability of the nervous system, and it supports the repair environment. Now we need to talk about something most people never want to hear. Because supplements are only half the story. You cannot rebuild nerves while pouring gasoline on the fire every day, and the gasoline is inflammation. Specifically, the kind driven by chronic sugar spikes, refined carbohydrates, industrial seed oils, poor blood sugar control, and liquid sugar. If you are drinking soda, fruit juice, sweetened tea, or heavily sweetened coffee while trying to repair neuropathy, you are asking the body to clean up the fire while you keep throwing lighter fluid on it. That is not repair. That is sabotage. The same goes for a diet built around refined starch, ultra-processed snacks, and inflammatory oils. Because nerve repair is not just about swallowing the right capsule. It is about changing the internal environment the nerve has to live inside. If the environment stays toxic, the nerve stays stressed. One of the simplest, most powerful moves you can make is this. Eliminate liquid sugar completely. It is one of the fastest ways to reduce the glycation burden. The second is to reduce the industrial oils that worsen inflammation and membrane dysfunction. And the third, so simple that people underestimate it, is walking after meals. A 10-minute walk after your largest meal helps use glucose while it is still in circulation. That means less sugar sticking around long enough to damage tissue. It is one of the cheapest medicines you have. Now I want to prepare you for something that confuses a lot of people. The awakening phase. When nerves start getting access to fuel again, they do not always become comfortable immediately. Sometimes they become noisier first. More tingling, more buzzing, more little electrical flickers, and people panic. They say, "The tingling is worse. I think I'm getting worse." Sometimes they are not getting worse. Sometimes the line is coming back online. Think of a foot that has fallen asleep. When circulation returns, it does not feel peaceful at first. It tingles, it buzzes, it aches, but that is not the feeling of death. It is the feeling of reactivation. The same thing can happen when a damaged nerve starts functioning more actively again. Now, severe worsening should always be evaluated appropriately. I am not telling you to ignore alarming changes. I am telling you to understand that healing and awakening do not always feel gentle. Sometimes numbness turns to tingling. Sometimes tingling turns to burning. Sometimes burning settles into more normal sensation later. That arc matters, because many people quit too early simply because they were never told what activation can feel like. Now let's make this practical. Here is the kind of daily framework I would want you to think about. Morning. A breakfast with some real fat and protein. This matters because fat-soluble nutrients are handled differently, and because blood sugar stability matters from the start of the day. With that breakfast, benfotiamine, methylcobalamin, and depending on tolerance and plan, acetyl L-carnitine. Then during the day, R-lipoic acid in the form your body can actually use. And at night, magnesium glycinate to support nerve calm, sleep quality, and repair conditions. Then the lifestyle lock. No liquid sugar, greatly reduced refined carbohydrates, better fats, less processed food, and a 10-minute walk after your biggest meal. That is not glamorous, that is effective. And how long does this take? Longer than people want, but shorter than people fear. The first few weeks are often about saturation, filling depleted systems. Then comes activation. Then, over months, repair. Weeks 3 to 6 may feel different from week 1. Month 3 may feel different from month 1. Month 6 may be the point where you suddenly realize, I have not been thinking about my feet all day. That is a major milestone, not because everything is magically cured, because the body is no longer screaming constantly. And I want to tell you something important. That timeline should not discourage you, because 3 months will pass anyway, 6 months will pass anyway. The only question is whether your nerves will still be starving at the end of that time or whether you finally gave them what they needed. I remember hearing about a man, let's call him Robert, in his early 70s, a retired carpenter. His hands had built his life, and then the numbness got so bad he could barely trust them. He could not feel fine texture, could not grip tools with confidence, felt like something central to his identity had been taken from him. He had been told it was just arthritis, aging, and maybe diabetes wear and tear. In other words, learn to live with it. He did not accept that. He started supporting the metabolic side of the problem properly. Not for 1 week, not with random supplements, with consistency. For the first month, very little changed. He felt discouraged. Then one day he noticed something tiny. He could feel texture better. A small thing. But small things are how life comes back. Months later, his hands were more functional. His confidence was better. And the story he was telling himself had changed from, I am fading, to, my body is responding. That is the power of understanding mechanism. Now there are cautions, and I want to say them clearly. If you are on chemotherapy, dealing with kidney disease, managing thyroid issues, or taking other significant medications, you need your clinician involved. This is not recklessness. This is intelligent care. The goal is not to replace medical treatment. The goal is to stop accepting shallow advice when deeper biology is sitting untouched. So let me leave you with this. The numbness in your feet is not a sentence. The burning in your hands is not a prophecy. The tingling is not proof that decline must continue forever. It is a signal that the wires are underfed. The insulation is damaged. The system is inflamed. The metabolic machinery is blocked. And now you know something many people never get told. There are reasons for that, and reasons can be addressed. That is what hope in medicine really is. Not fantasy, not denial, a mechanism you can act on. So do not wait for the silence. Do not wait until you cannot feel the floor. Do not wait until you are afraid of stairs, afraid of driving, afraid of the shower, afraid of the dark. Start feeding your nerves while they are still talking to you, because pain is a warning. Numbness is what comes after the warning is ignored. And if you act while the warning is still there, you give yourself a very different future. And let me close with one more truth. Most people think nerve damage is just about comfort. pain control, sleep, maybe balance. But it is bigger than that. Neuropathy is about whether you can trust your own body, whether you can feel the brake pedal, whether you can sense the floor, whether you can button a shirt without looking down 3 times, whether you can walk through a dark room without fear, whether you feel independent, or whether you begin quietly shrinking your life because your body no longer feels reliable. That is why this matters. This is not vanity. This is not minor discomfort. This is function, safety, freedom, dignity. So here is what I want you to remember. Benzodiazepine to help reopen the blocked metabolic pathway. R-lipoic acid to reduce oxidative stress. Methylcobalamin to support nerve insulation and repair. Careful B6, never careless megadoses. Magnesium to calm the system. Real food changes to stop feeding the damage. And patience long enough to let biology respond. That is the full picture. That is the protocol mindset. That is how you stop treating neuropathy like a mystery and start treating it like a system. You are not powerless here. You are not crazy for wanting more than pain management. And you are not asking too much by wanting your nerves to work again as well as they possibly can, because your body was built to repair. It just cannot repair well in the wrong environment. Give it a better one. That is where recovery begins.